What's up, everyone, and welcome into the Buffalo Sports Collective. It is Wednesday, June 19th, 2024. As always, I am PK alongside my co-host Phil, sitting right across from me, episode 291. Phil, it's been a long week. I've recovered fully from last weekend. I do have a question for you.
Sure.
I have dogs. You have cats. When you lived with me, there were 2 cats in the house. Then we added a dog, so on and so forth. But other than that, I fostered 2 cats for about 2 months. But other than that, I really haven't had any cats in my life. So I have a question for you as the BSC cat person. We're designating you as the cat person. We just gave our dogs, all 3 of them, baths today. And me and Brooke have kind of got it down to a science where it's not that difficult. Pick them up, throw them in the tub, wash them maybe 5 minutes max. Get them out, dry them, throw them outside. Not literally throw them outside, but get them outside so they dry off. Do cats get baths? I know they clean themselves, but is bathing a cat part of a normal pet chore that you have to do? I don't know.
Some cats are worse at cleaning than others. We have a pretty split club here. The boy cat we have, Caspian, he does not quite as good of a job as he should of cleaning himself. He tries sometimes, but for him, we've used some dry shampoo that kind of rinse-free, dries on its own kind of thing, just to give his coat a little bit of some love. Have never done a full bath or anything, but just some basic cleaning, I guess. Even that's kind of every once in a while. And then Beans, who's my cat, she is pretty much perfect. She has a long hair, but she doesn't shed that much, and I have never even needed to attempt to clean her. Her coat is always just flawless. She cleans herself insanely a lot, so she's never really had any issues. Grooming, she cleans herself all the time, nonstop. So she's very, very clean and tidy. Cass is a little lazier, and he's also a little older. So for him, we do try to give him some love every once in a while and a little dry shampoo kind of idea. But the other cats, Nargle, as you know, should have probably been bathed a lot. She was kind of gross. She was a gross cat. But then same thing. Queen, who was a long hair, she never needed anything because she was always a very good cleaner. And I think that's where Beans got all of her cleaning from, was from Queen. So she learned well, I'll put it that way. But not a lot, very little. I know some people that have cats do it sometimes. I don't know too many that give full-on baths of the cat owners I own. I think most people just kind of let it go and just hope the cat does a good job by itself. But yeah, it needs a little assistance every once in a while.
Little TLC. Yeah, that's what I kind of figured, but I wasn't positive, and
yeah,
I figured there might be other people out there that don't know as well. So now they're filled in. So thank you for the lesson on cats. On today's show, we're going to talk more than just cats. We got the Mad Matty Minute. We got the 3 more teams for report cards. We're going over Vancouver, Calgary, and Saskatchewan today. And then we got a little Bills segment coming up because mandatory OTAs just wrapped up and training camp is around the corner in July. But before we dive into anything, remember you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Buffalo Sports Collective, and on X and Blue Sky at Buffalo Sports Co. Don't forget to follow our channel wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out our website at buffalosportscollective.com, where you can find our store for the BSC. Just click the shop tab at the top of the page, or if you're not late, or if you are too lazy to go to our website, you can just go to our social media accounts on our link tree. You can click for there. It takes you right to the store. You can represent the BSC on the go. And for the last one here, look for the time breakdowns on the description of the show, as promised.
I think before you get to the Mad Matty Minute, it is Father's Day today as we're recording. It'll be Monday when people are listening, or Wednesday. Oh my gosh, I'm still in season mode. It'll be a little bit before people are catching this episode, but we are recording on Father's Day. And as you just mentioned, you got dogs, I got cats, and we have fathers that fathered us. So happy Father's Day to all the dads out there, whether you're a pet dad, human dad, whatever whatever you are, we know a lot of the players are also fathers, and just happy Father's Day. Hopefully everyone's enjoying it. The weather was a little warm for me, but overall I know it was a very good day for a cookout and everything, so hopefully everyone's out there having fun, staying safe, but happy Father's Day to everyone out there.
That's a good call because I always forget we're once a week and we're recording on Sunday. So also when this episode comes out, it will be Juneteenth. So make sure that you take some time to further educate yourself on the reason behind the holiday that is celebrated that day. So make sure, whatever you're doing, take a little bit of time, try to get a little bit of a history lesson on why Juneteenth is a celebrated holiday and has gotten more notoriety and attention that it rightfully deserves in the past few years. But yeah, it was a good call by Father's Day and Juneteenth because I always forget we're recording early, so this comes out late and you got to remember in advance of what's going on. But yeah, like as promised, I pointed out if you're watching on YouTube, which we do stream on YouTube, well, not stream, but we put it out on YouTube. It's future streaming. I was thinking about streaming because we were talking about that before we hit record. But the graphic, the Mad Matty Minute is above me. Congratulations to Pat. I finally got it here. I was too lazy, but that's Matt Vinc right there. This is me, and that's Delvin Shanahan right there. Looking back, just going, oh, baby, still Matt Vinc is sitting right there, baby. So this is the graphic that will be up here every Mad Matty Minute. And for those of you who have just caught on now, or this is your first episode, welcome into the BSC. But if you've missed the past two episodes, every Wednesday moving forward, until we get word on Matt Vinc and his plans, I'm going to be offering my services on anything I can do to entice Matt Vinc to return to attempt another three-peat, another championship, another mark on his resume of his illustrious career. And so far, I'm cleaning up after his animals, and I am returning any packages that need to be sent back, whether it's Amazon, Target, whatever it was. You can go listen to those others. So Phil, on today's episode, instead of using the expensive Uber or DoorDash or any other food delivering services, let me get that food for you. Late night Taco Bell, you got the itch? I got you. Dinner for the family one night because you don't want to cook? I got you. Morning donuts and coffee. Matt Vinc, I got you. So, my latest offer, any type of food delivery service that you want, whether it's just groceries or you got the itch for a mighty taco. No matter where you are, if you're sitting in the back of a bar, if you're sitting at a high school or a play at one of your kids' schools, I got you. Just send me a message. I will deliver your food. That is the third offer that I'm offering to Matt Vinc and his services, and my services to him if he returns for another year a part of the Buffalo Bandits.
What if he wants you to shop at Wegmans?
I'll suffer through it. I'll have to do it, and might stiff arm some old ladies out of the way, but I got you.
That's fair.
But
that's a good one because those delivery fees, they add up real quick.
Yeah.
That's a lot of times it's tough to get delivery just because of the fees, and especially when it's within driving distance, but you don't want to do it, but it's so close, but you just don't want to leave the house. But at the same time, that delivery fee is expensive enough to usually motivate me to go get it myself. But there's a lot of times you just want to get home, especially after work or something. You just get home, you don't want to leave again, but that delivery fee, it adds up quick.
Yeah. So like I said, all of these offers are legally binding, a part of the contract if they want to work these in.
I hope you have to do some of them for the record.
That's legally binding contract offers right now. So there you go. There you have it. Next Wednesday, maybe we won't have a fourth installment. Maybe we'll get word. I doubt it, but stay tuned possibly next week. It's always a possibility that this segment does not come back. So fingers crossed it doesn't come back for a good reason. So Phil, we'll move on to the league report cards for the Buffalo Bandits. And I shouldn't say for the Buffalo Bandits, but we use these report cards to try to figure out if there's any pieces from these teams that the Buffalo Bandits might be interested in this offseason, because we already heard that there's going to be possibly a lot of movement with the Buffalo Bandits. A lot of players on this team might not be back next year just because of the roster crunch that they've had since COVID kind of concluded and the season picked back up 3 years ago. So what we're doing is each episode for now the next 4 weeks, we're having 3 teams on the episode talking about the offseason moves that might be made before opening a free agency, what their team looked like last year, what the team shakes up looking like this year, any free agents that are on the market from that team, UFAs, RFAs, so on and so forth. So our first team here, we're starting with the Vancouver Warriors, who did finish 12th last year. They finished 8-10, one of the many teams that finished 8-10. 11.22 goals for, which was 10th in the league. 11.72 goals against, which was 9th. They hold the 4th overall pick. They've already made a move. We talked about it last show. They traded Kyle Killen out to Las Vegas for picks. Phil, what was your thought on the overall season of Vancouver? I know it was kind of the first half was one season for them, and the second half was another. And they were a scary team, and their season kind of picked up once they beat the Buffalo Bandits when Buffalo traveled all the way to Vancouver.
Yeah, they're definitely going to be a team that's in it next year for sure. They had some pretty big jumps in their player ability. Charlon Beatties went from 59 points to 98. That is a massive jump forward. Martel went from 25 points in 13 games to 73 in 18. Another massive jump forward for him. Ball went from 87 to 104, so not a huge jump, but still maintained what he was able to do and still got a little bit better. They have a pretty decent young defensive core with Grant and Lady. Both look really good for young defenders, and then Dilks just won Defender of the Year. So to me, all the pieces for them to get better, and what we saw at the end of the year, I think it's going to be a very similar Georgia jump. Georgia at the end of last year, we saw them really take off and almost made playoffs, similar to Vancouver. And then this year, Georgia maintained that and was able to continue their strong push and then made it to playoffs this time. I think Vancouver's going to do the same thing, where headed into next season, they just kind of need to repeat what they did at the end of the year, pick it up a little bit, and I think they will be a team to watch to potentially make playoffs. The big thing for me with them is a goalie. I do not think they have one. I think they need some help there. I know Walsh is very young, so you can kind of lean on that a little bit. I don't know if, Bold to me just isn't the answer, but I don't know if Walsh is either. I do think they just need a goalie. This team got a goalie. I think they're that much scarier of a team, and with the pieces on offense they have that are good building blocks, they have good building blocks on the defense. They could use another offensive player. They could use another defender, just like most teams. But I think, to me, the biggest hole they have is a goalie. And if they get one, they're going to be a scary team, probably looking for a good playoff push next season.
I do agree with the goalie sentiment. I think Walsh has the makings of being a good goalie, but I don't know if this is a team that is more built for waiting around to see if he's ready to develop.
Exactly.
Dilks is 34. You got Beers, who's 35. You got Keegan Ball, who's a UFA. Will he be coming back? He's 33. You got Adam Shalombides, who, yes, is still a younger player, but he's at 28, so he's in his middle of his prime right now. You got Kevin Crowley, who's 36. So while this team has young pieces to build around, they also have some of these veteran pieces that are slowly aging out that they brought in to get Vancouver over the hump and back into the playoffs. And do you want to rely on a 23-year-old Aiden Walsh, who is, yes, unproven and had good points of the season last year, but is he one that's able to carry this team? Kind of like on a very smaller level, kind of like a Matt Vinc in front of the defense that Buffalo has. Do you want a more veteran presence goalie back there? Like this could be a team that could be interested in acquiring like a Zach Higgins. Like a Zach Higgins behind this defense, that team would go from, okay, you're right on the edge, you're pretty much one game away, one win away from making the playoffs and making some noise, to possibly one of those ones that's hosting a playoff game by having a goalie back there where, yes, if your defense is really good, but if they get beat, you got a guy back there that you can rely upon. And you just saw the numbers that Zach Higgins put up. We went on that on the last show, and we said that if Mad Vinc retires, maybe Buffalo is out to go get a guy like a Zach Higgins. So I do agree with the goalie sentiment. I think the other point about this, because a lot of the defense is already locked in. Bauer still got a year. Dilk's got a year. Braden Lady needs another deal, but he's got his rights with Vancouver for another 2 years at least until he gets RFA status. You got Owen Grant another year. Matt Beers has got 2 more years. Charbonneau. Charbonnet, thank you. RFA, he's likely coming back. You got Chris Willem, RFA, likely coming back. The only UFA on the defense is Medisic, and he was the captain on that team. We're going to be somebody that we talk about in a second here, but the defense is pretty much locked in back there. Then you flip forward to the forwards. Ball's a UFA. You got Charlon Beatties, who an RFA. Martell's an RFA. Crowley's got one more year. Lowen's a UFA. Brad McCulley's got one more year. So I think the defense is pretty set. I think you're going to be looking to target possibly a goalie if they don't believe in Walsh, but also is Ball coming back? I think he is a very, very important piece to that offense, but if you can add another piece to that offense, they can go from border to one of those teams that's looking to host a playoff game.
And you got to start looking at replacing a Crowley at some point. I mean, I know he's got 1 year left, but not something you want to really bank on. And even Lewin, 35 years old. We know we see a lot of these really top players, and even the Bandits have a few that are signed up until their 35, 36 season, but some of these other guys play till they're 38, 39, but you can't bank on that for every single player in the league. So this 35 and 36-year-olds, you don't know where their talent's going to be, if it's going to start taking that drop-off point, or they can keep it going. But either way, one's a UFA and one's got 1 year left, so you got to start thinking about trying to replace those players. And that's 100 points between two players. That's not nothing. So definitely something they need to look into.
Yeah, so overall, I think it was, like we mentioned, it was a cold start. It was a very disappointing start at the trade deadline. I was one of those ones that's saying, hey, why don't you trade a Dilks? Why don't you trade a Beers? Why don't you look towards the future? And they didn't. They held firm, and they went on that giant run. And, again, that's why they're there and I'm here. But I think a grade of a B, which we put, I'm getting better at this. I'm like a weatherman right there. I think a B is a good grade for them because I think they're on the right track. I think Georgia is a great example that you tossed out that, last year, or 2 years ago, I should say, because last year just happened. 2 years ago, Georgia started real cold. What did they go, 0-9 to start, or 0-8 or 0-7 or something like that to start the season? And they went on that unbelievable run, and Vancouver was similar. And they used that Buffalo Bandits victory, that kind of upset that they pulled out in Vancouver, to kind of restart their season, and went on that massive run. And I was one of those ones that 5-6 weeks out of the playoffs, I was like, Vancouver's toast. And they still continue to go on that run. But, they got some big-time UFAs, Bold, Ball, Lowen, and Medisk. And I was struggling to figure out which piece that Buffalo might be interested on this team, because Ball would be a great addition, but it would involve moving a couple more of the righties out the door to bring in a guy like Ball who puts up over 100 points. You're talking about possibly moving a Chase Frazier. You're talking about possibly moving a Nanticoke. You're possibly talking about Buchanan not coming back, because you can't really bring in a guy to command those points and command that ball without moving somebody else out. So that's the most difficult part about trying to fiddle with this forward group a bit. Is there changes coming? I doubt it, because they led the league in scoring, but that's kind of why I'm always targeting, goalies or transition players or defense. And that's why I'm kind of leaning towards, hey, would they take a longer look at a Brett Medisk? And, he had 69 loose balls, only 3 assists. He's 36 years old, but 20 caused turnovers and 14 blocked shots. If a guy like Paul Dawson does not return and you're looking to add another veteran piece back there to be another voice, why not add Vancouver's captain back there?
Yeah, I think that 1-for-1 is what I would be looking for if Dawson does not come back. A guy like Mitski could be that replacement. This team was really tough, like you just mentioned. There really isn't much on here that the Bandits could do. And like you mentioned, Keegan Ball, yes, it'd be amazing, but those players often don't swap around or swap teams. And if they do, you're losing something else, which, for a 100-point player is probably not the worst case scenario if you had to lose somebody. But at the same time, the likeliness, we're trying to be as realistic as possible. I don't see Ball signing randomly with the Bands. It'd be amazing, sure. And even as we look at all these teams, to me, I think the Bandits have probably one defender, one transition, and one forward if Buchanan ends up retiring. So just looking at this mentally, I have, I think, one and one as far as spots open, one forward, one defense, and one transition that I think the Bandits might be looking to either add or replace in the offseason. So that's kind of the mentality I'm going into this with, as far as like picking players, but I do agree. I think if Dawson decides not to come back, like you mentioned, I think it was last episode that he kind of jumped the gun on himself. So we don't know if he's officially coming back or not, but I think another team's captain on defense who also has those block shot numbers, those cause turnover numbers, a player that could settle that young defense down again for another season would be a good pickup.
Yeah, and a lot of these moves are based on not knowing what is going to be happening. It's kind of like, would Buffalo be interested in this player if this happens? That's
right.
kind of what it was with Zach Higgins. Like, if you still have Matt Vinc, you're not going to look to acquire a Zach Higgins when he would just be a backup behind a Matt Vinc. It's if
right.
Matt Vinc is not there, this is who we would be interested in. If Paul Dawson is not here, this is who we'd be interested in. That's why it's kind of a little bit more tougher unless you actually listen to these episodes. If you're just looking at this graphic, you're going, Zach Higgins, why would you be interested? That doesn't make any sense. So you got to listen to the episodes for the reasoning why it might be interested. And I saw somebody point out, hey, there's no way that Las Vegas would be moving Connor Kirst. And I'd be like, yeah, but if you listen to the episode, you'd understand. We already said that. It would just be a great addition. But before we move on to the next report card of Calgary, Phil, let's get our first sponsor on this show, Tap That Tap Room.
Tap That Tap Room is at 363 Delaware Street in Tonawanda, New York. They are Buffalo's first women-owned self-pour bar featuring 30 consistently rotating taps of beer, cider, sour, seltzers, and malt beverages with an insane amount of events coming up. PK, take it away.
Yeah, I'm going to... This is a small tangent, but it applies to this. I'm going to put a seatbelt on here so people can buckle up for a long thing. I'm just going to pull it across one day and buckle it in. But yeah, there's a lot of events coming up this week. Remember, we're only once a week now, so this is going to be a full weeks-long events that are popping up. And Tap That Tap Room is going to be really busy. Wednesday the 19th, Geeks Who Drink Trivia starting at 7:30. The next night, Thursday the 20th, karaoke starts at 7. Friday, I'm probably going to be in attendance because my wife's going to drag me to this one. June 21st, RuPaul's Drag Race Trivia and a drag show starting at 7:30. We're going to try to boost a little bit higher than our 7th place finish last time. Saturday the 22nd, they got 2 events going on. Paint Night with Mary starting at 4 o'clock, and then live music from Evan Lidicki. I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. 7 p.m. start, and then if the wrong last name, you can hit me. I don't care. I will take the punch. And then Sunday, June 23rd, 12:30, Euchre Tournament starting up. It's very, very crowded events happening at Tap That Tap Room with the nice weather. Patio is probably going to be opening, and a lot of beverages are going to be flowing. So if you have any questions or more interest on any of these events, you could check out their Facebook page for all of them. Phil, let's dive into Calgary now, who Buffalo faced last year. I believe it was their week 17, their 17th game of the season they faced them off. And Calgary is a team who it's going to be very, very interesting to see what they do this offseason. They finished 11th, 8-10, another team, 8-10, 11 goals for, tied for 11th in the league, 10.78 goals against, 4th in the league. So someone was right about that offense. They hold the 5th overall pick, and Phil, they've already been busy this offseason. One of the teams that have already made a big move, they traded Shane Simpson, the transition finalist, transition Player of the Year finalist, I should say, for Griffin Hall and a few picks to Las Vegas. Las Vegas is loading up on some of these key pieces, but this is a team that has a ton of UFAs coming up, big name UFAs coming up, and they have lost a bunch of big name UFAs in recent history. You could think of Dane Dopey, you think of Curtis Dixon, you think of just a number of players, and there could be more players headed out the door
and
under Josh
coach.
Sanderson's leadership. So it's going to be a very, very interesting offseason to see what they're able to do, and only having one franchise tag with 2 big name UFAs under the boards here. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, this team is scary, and not in a good way. I think they were exposed last year. Like you mentioned, I mean, I think they've been kind of riding their defense, their goaltending, their transition, and it hasn't been a secret. I mean, it's been what they've done. That's been their MO for a long time now, but I think their offense got exposed last year to simply not being good enough. So when the defense and goaltending took even a slight step back, they just weren't a good enough team to keep up, and their offense was almost identical across the board as far as their top forwards. They pretty much had the exact same season in 2023 that they had in 2024. So no one really stepped up. No one really fell off. But for a team that needed offensive help, you needed more players to actually step up. I mean, the offense was pretty similar. The defense with Courier, he's still incredible, but even he had a bit of a down year for him. I mean, it was a down year for one of the best players in the league. He went from 33 points to just 17, and he went from 43 caused turnovers, which is insane, to 30. So 17 points, 30 caused turnovers, still an incredible year, but for a player of his caliber, it'd be like Dane Smith going from 135 points to 95. You know, it'd just be that still a great year for an incredible player, but he also took a little bit of a step back. Eli Salama, I believe it is, went from 18 caused turnovers to 38. He had a massive jump as a defender, so he was someone who actually did step up for the whole team. I think
you read that backwards, Phil.
What?
He had 18 caused
really?
turnovers
he went way
this year.
Down?
Yeah.
I was looking at both of them earlier. Yep, you're right. He took a huge step back. So the whole team either stayed the same or went backwards a little bit, and that is not good for a team like you just mentioned that has a lot of massive UFAs headed into the offseason, the biggest one being Christian Del Bianco. I think he's a player. I mean, I know the love I have for him has not gone unnoticed. But I think the big thing with him is that he's kind of like your Josh Allen, right? I mean, if you have a player like that, especially in this league, if you have that kind of goaltender, you're always going to be in every game. You're going to have a shot to win. Like, the whole team is built around the goalie's abilities. I mean, some teams have really good offenses, really good defenses, and only okay goaltending that they can kind of get by. But this team is built around CDB, and if he does not come back, this team's in a ton of trouble. And I don't know. Like, if you're him, I don't like. Would you play the waiting game to see if like which one of these UFAs ends up coming back? Like, if you lose Courier after already losing Simpson, if you're Del Bianco, like, I don't know if he really wants to come back. I mean, I know he's stationed out in Calgary, so like, is he coming to the East Coast? Probably not. But to shift around like a team. I mean, if it'd be gross, but a team like Vancouver who needs a goalie, who has your former head coach, if you're looking to jump ship to a team that is pretty much a goalie away from making some noise, and Calgary to me just needs a lot of help. I mean, even if they are able to bring all their UFAs back, they need more than what they're able to give right now. So you need to bring most of the UFAs back, plus additional players on both the back end and the offense and your goalie. I don't know, like, if you look at like just two teams that both finished 8 and 10, I think Calgary and Vancouver are in wildly different positions than each other. Calgary just, for a team that's so good, and I mean, recently-ish won the championship over Buffalo. I just feel like they're in a lot of trouble in this offseason. It's going to be a very wild offseason for them.
Yeah, just based on, I'm just basing it on the Shane Simpson deal. I think they're going to be looking towards a rebuild/retool year.
But if you're Del Bianco, like, do you want to be a part of that?
Well, that's what I'm going to get into. But like, just looking at the forwards, you got Tanner Cook, who's 26, and Hayden Dixon, who's 24. I think both of those players you were expecting to step up, and I think they had decent years for secondary pieces. But I think you're looking for them to step up and being another piece to the King Pace kind of dynamic duo up top, which, you know, if those are your two leading pieces, you need a third player up there. You can't. Buffalo has the Smith and Byrne. You know, they're pretty locked in with top two players that are producing 130 some odd points. If you're only getting 105 maxed out at your top player, you're going to need one or two other players that are up in the 80s or 90s to contribute. And Cook was at 65. Your next closest was Dixon at 46. So I think their offense needs at least 1 to 2 more pieces there. And you got Courier, who's a UFA. You got Dan Taylor, who's a UFA. You got Shush, who's a UFA. You got Hogarth, who's an RFA. And Pace is an RFA. So you got three guys locked in, with King with 1 year, Cook with 2, and Dixon with 1. But their offense needs a lot of pieces. Then you flip forward to the defense. Like you already said, this defense in Del Bianco has been carrying this load since they lost Dobie, since they lost Dixon, and so on and so forth. the big thing with the UFAs, which I'm thinking about here, is you got Jeff Cornwell UFA, Courier UFA, Josh Courier UFA, Zach Courier UFA, Christian Del Bianco, Steve Fryer, Logan Shush, and Dan Taylor, all UFAs. They only have one franchise tag. And when you're looking at it and breaking this down, it's going to Zach Courier or Christian Del Bianco. And I think you have to put it on Christian Del Bianco, no question. He's 27 years old. You're not letting him out of the building. He can't reject it. So for me, I see the path for Christian Del Bianco to want to go to Vancouver. Former coach, great defense in front of him, and a building offense there. But you're going to put a franchise tag on him to prevent any of that from happening. You're going to prevent him from even talking to other teams. Then he comes down to Zach Courier. Are you going to be able to convince him that, hey, stomach this it's a small rebuild, we'll be back in the playoffs the following year, or we're going for it this year? That's the biggest thing for me, and why I have a Zach Courier here to go try to sign, because he would be perfect in the transition game to be an addition to that Ian McKay. That's what I'm kind of looking for, is another transition to pair with Ian McKay, and I think Zach Courier would be perfect with it, along with his electric defense back there. And then the other piece would be Eli Salama, who you mentioned. He only played in 13 games last year, so that's a part of the reason why his numbers came down a bit. But he's another lockdown defender, and he's only 28 years old, and he's still got one more year on his deal. So those are two players that I would target off this. We gave him a C+ because I think they have a lot of figuring out to do. I think I think you summed it up perfectly with Josh Allen compared to Christian Del Bianco. When you have him in net, you're always going to have a chance. But unless things in front of you produce and you're getting goals over the double-digit mark, which they were struggling with so often this year. They won so many games under 10 because Christian Del Bianco and this defense bailed them out so many times. Like, if they would have scored 11.5 goals, if they would have averaged 11.5 goals, this would have been a playoff team. It's as simple as that. Like, they were struggling on offense way too much. I think this is a team that's going to try to find out what their identity is beyond the Christian Del Bianco mixed with the Shane Simpson deal, because Shane Simpson's already out the door. So it's a team that's going to be very interesting to track this offseason on what they do. Do they go all in with trying to convince Zach Courier to come back, or is it, hey, we're going to keep relying on Christian Del Bianco and we'll try to add pieces here and there?
Are Josh and Zach related?
Yes.
Okay.
I think brothers.
So that's the other thing. I mean, if you lose Zach, do you lose Josh? Does Josh say, all right, well, screw you.
Or vice versa,
I'm out of here. And that's if that's true, that's another 35 points out the door on top of, I mean, yeah, you already mentioned Shane Simpson. Like, 24 points from Shane Simpson's not a ton. 16 goals isn't massive, but on a team that's desperate for offense, just letting that walk is not good. And then if Zach ends up going anywhere else and Josh follows him, that's a lot more points out the door. I mean, that he was their 5th leading scorer. Like, yeah, 35 points isn't a ton, but again, on a team desperate for offense, you have to convince these guys to come back. I don't know. I mean, Logan Schuss, he used to be a really good player the last couple seasons. I would assume he's been dealing with some injury issues and things of that nature. So only played in 4 games last year. We'll see if he can bounce back. But again, is he even going to sign there? So I don't know. This team is, their offseason is going to be probably one of the more interesting kind of fun ones from a outsider perspective to keep an eye on, just to see what happens, because we don't necessarily care, other than maybe getting Zach Courier, which would be a dream come true for me. My goodness, would he be just incredible for the Bandits, and what he could do as
on that wall behind you.
Oh yeah, he would immediately be picked up. As I've loved him for a real long time. He's just a really, really good player at only 30 years old, a transition kind of player that the Bandits need. He would be amazing. I don't see it happening, but it'd be amazing if he did. But I mean, obviously Del Bianco, like you said, if they have the franchise tag, they can do that. If he comes back, we'll see what other players like Courier kind of do. Is Del Bianco enough to convince him to come back? Like, I'm sure they are very close buddies. They've been together for a long time now, and 2 of the staples of this team. So I mean, that might be enough to convince him to come back again. But at the same time, these guys want to win championships, and do you see this team fighting with the Bandits, the Toronto Rock, the Albany Firewolves? Like, can they keep up with these teams? And I don't know. They need a lot. They need a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting offseason. Kind of like we said last offseason, where we were talking about, hey, who could possibly be a replacement for a a Matt Vinc in net, and everybody was pointing out, hey, Nick Rose is out there. Why don't you go trade for Christian Del Bianco and stuff like that? Christian Del Bianco is not leaving Calgary unless he retires. Like there's no way Calgary's letting them out the door. That franchise tag is for sure going right to Christian Del Bianco. I don't have a doubt in my mind. The only way it doesn't is if they work out a longer term deal with Christian Del Bianco, then they'll put it on Zach Currier. That has to be the conversation every single day in Calgary right now, is trying to get one of them locked up to a longer term deal so you can use that franchise tag on the other. That's the only way that he's not getting that franchise tag, is if he locks up to a longer term deal. And then the only other thing, and then we can move on to Saskatchewan. Christian Del Bianco being a UFA at 27 is unheard of in the NLL. Fix the contracts. They shouldn't take these guys until over 30 years old to reach free agency. It's a messed up way. They have to renegotiate and work on this new player contracts and all the new CBA. They have to work on that, because it shouldn't take players to being over 30 years old in the almost back end of their career to reach free agency. It's stupid. It doesn't happen in any other sport. That's
make the league that much more exciting if they were available much earlier. Like the off season of the league would be more interesting to fans if players could actually move somewhere.
More eyes on the sport.
Exactly.
But who are we? But Phil, before we dive into Saskatchewan here, let's give our shout out to our next sponsor on this show, Mr. Sizzles. Phil, take it away.
Mr. Sizzles is currently at 346 Connecticut Street in Buffalo, New York, but they are opening 2 more locations, one in Clarence, one in Hamburg, one of them opening up hopefully soon, over summer, sooner than later, and the other one opening up a little bit later this year, but hopefully both will be open this year, and they are currently open 7 days a week, 11 to 11, with a brunch menu on Saturday and Sunday from 11 to 3.
Yeah, I keep keeping my eye out for the targeted date of when they're opening. It's got to be getting very, very close. But, Phil, hot weather is here. It's brutal this week.
Is.
Yes, I'm already talking because it's Sunday. This is coming out Wednesday. So I've been sweating up a storm Monday and Tuesday, Phil. So hot weather all week. Let's cool down with some milkshakes. You can go from the Loganberry, the peanut butter and fluff, orange creamsicle, thick mint, Phil. And a lot of these varieties are available for dairy-free and in vegan. So if you get a little upset stomach with the milk, you can go the vegan option, and it's dairy-free. It'll be
like
delicious. But if you are not a milkshake person and you like a float, there's plenty of options over there. You can grab an orange cream, a cream soda. Phil, there's so many different milkshakes and floats available. There's cocktails on the menu. There's frozen cocktails on the menu. Everything is absolutely delicious at Mr. Sizzles. So go spend a little time out there, maybe even a little bit of the patio action on the sidewalk there. It's in the shade. Might as well cool down with some nice frozen treats at Mr. Sizzles. You can check out their menu on their socials or at mrsizzles.com. Let's dive into our final team here, the third team on this episode, the 10th team to finish in the standings, the Saskatchewan Rush. Another 8-10 team, Phil. 12.06 goals for, 4th in the league, 11.67 goals against, 8th in the league. They hold the 6th overall pick. This was a team that I was not super high on in the offseason, but as the season progressed and I was seeing all the numbers and the advanced metrics from Cooper Perkins, I'm like, okay, this team has a really legit shot to make the playoffs. And they met on a run, but I think they got a little bit sidetracked because their schedule was so messed up with the snow game in Philly early on, and that got pushed. And then they had 5 games in like 13 or 14 days or something ridiculous like that. So I think they got punished by their schedule, and I think this is a team that is maybe 1 or 2 defensive pieces away from breaking into that playoff spot next year and getting back to the rush that we've been known to see back to when they were in Edmonton and then moved to Saskatchewan and were the last team besides Buffalo to win back-to-back championships.
Yeah, this team reminds me also of Vancouver, where they're just a few pieces away, but for an 8-10 team, they're absolutely making the push, and they were a little bit scarier down the stretch and kind of phased out, but at the same time, you saw life throughout the season for this team. Definitely a team that has the potential, I think, with a few extra players to make playoffs next year. I think Church did a great job, really liked him, not happy that he's staying. Keenan went from 72 points to 90, so he did a really nice job with a big bump there. Zach Mans did his best job to fill in for Mark Matthews with 84 points. He had a huge coming out party for that team, and he's only 26, so he's looking really good. Walter went from 20 points in 10 games to 48 and 18, so he had a nice bump for himself in his sophomore season. And then Dodds and Triolo seem to be a pretty solid complementary pieces to the offense. I know you're a big Mike Triolo fan, I believe. And then Nate K, our former buddy, had an okay season, but still not bad. Their offense, to me, as a whole, honestly looks pretty good, especially for some of those players like Zach Mans trying to fill in and doing extremely well, but it was his first year with the team. So, can that kind of blossom even more? Walter, who was a sophomore, can he take another step forward for this offense and continue to produce? So Dodds is only 23. Like, they have a pretty solid offense. And then obviously they lost Rubish and Dilks, which is massive. But at the same time, I think they have the younger pieces to kind of make up for it. Boudreau went from 12 caused turnovers to 25. Sophomore Barnable went from 9 and 19 to 21 and 17. And McClellan went from 10 to 22. So, yes, they lost huge defensive pieces, but I think they have a lot of young defensive players that are stepping up and stepping into those roles to kind of take over for Rubish and Dilks, who are pretty impossible to replace, but they're doing a good job having these younger core really step up for those players. And then Chiliano, to me, never really been sold on him. He's not a bad goalie. You could definitely do worse out there. He's, I think, just average, mediocre, probably a little above average. I've just never loved him. But he's not a bad goalie to have by any means. He's still a pretty good goalie to have on your team. So I don't necessarily think they need a goaltender. If they got somebody else to compete for that position, I think that would be smart of them. But overall, I think their team looks pretty solid. Like you mentioned, they could maybe use a couple extra defensive players to go along with those younger talented players to really just kind of gel that whole defense together. But this is another team, to me, very similar to Vancouver, that is going to possibly make some noise next year, and another more competition for the league, which is great, but not great for the Bandits. A lot of these teams seem to be ready to step up and really be just kind of thrown in the mix for playoffs next season.
Yeah, we gave this team a B-. I think their biggest question, and I guess it's not even a question anymore because they all signed contract extensions, is kind of what's going on behind the bench. And this is not the first time that their GM has had to come down and be the co-head coach, and that's what it's going to be happening next season as well. As Derek Keenan came down from the rafters and went behind the bench midway through the season, and I think that's it's an interesting formula. Buffalo did it with Rich Kilgore and Johnny T, and kind of working Johnny T in. I think that was a stepping stone for John Tavares to figure out how to be a head coach behind an NL bench, and then the following year after COVID, he kind of took over, and that can work, but it also could not work because you're getting multiple messages sent to the players. So it on one hand, hey, more experience behind the bench with a Derek Keenan can definitely help. But on the other hand, hey, if one coach is saying one thing and the other coach is saying something else, and I'm not saying that's happening, I'm just saying that too many voices in your head can also affect a team. But this is a team that's pretty much locked down. I mean, they have two UFAs in Mike Mallory and Mike Messenger. If they can bring back Mike Messenger and add one or two more pieces, whether it's young guys coming up that you drafted following or previous years, or you're using that number 6 overall pick to bring in another piece here. I think they need a guy. When you're looking at a Frank Chiliano, yes, you can do better than Chiliano, but you can also do worse than them. And I think they brought him in to solidify the goaltending position, and I think he is good enough to get them back to the playoffs. Is he good enough to win them a championship? I don't think so. I think they are looking for the piece that is behind Chiliano. I think he's kind of like a Lindy Ruff. Get them to a certain point, and then you can look for the next piece there. And I know I'm referencing all different sports and everything in this episode, but
we're bringing the Buffalo in, you know.
We are. But when you're looking at the offense here, I'll credit a lot of the people out there. They saw Zach Mans play in the summer before this last season. They're like, he is ready to blossom and take off. And Saskatchewan saw that as well, and they made the deal for him. They sent out an older Mark Matthews, who was on the last deal of his contract, brought in a Zach Mans, brought in an Adam J, and Zach Mans definitely rewarded them. He's 26 years old. Like you said, 37 goals, 47 assists for 84 points. I think there's more that he can give, and I think there's more that he will give next year, and I think he's probably going to be that third piece. That's what I was saying with Calgary, what you were struggling with. You don't have that third piece in Calgary. I think you do in the Church, Keenan, and Mans, and that's a wet recipe for a great success. The one piece on offense that we talked about it midway through the season, and I was a bit let down by it, and I'm definitely let down by his season in general, is Patrick Dobbs. They brought him in from Panther City, and I know he is a secondary piece on there, so I'm not expecting him to be the 80, 90-point guy, but I feel like he's a guy that can get you 60. I feel like he can be a Chris Cloutier, a Chase Frazier on this team, and produce more. And 10 goals, 17 games, to me, is not enough for a guy like Patrick Dobbs, who you went out and acquired. You sent assets to Panther City to bring this guy in and be another piece on this offense. I think if you can get more offense out of him and you can add another piece on the back end, I think this is a team that's looking as a 5th, 6th, 7th seed next year in the playoffs if you can do those pieces and you can get the performance that you got out of Frank Scigliano on his good days and limit the bad days that he has. If you can limit those bad days and increase on the good days, I think this is a team that can be very dangerous if they're a 5th, 6th, 7th seed in the playoffs.
Yeah, Dodds went from 84 points in his rookie year to 50 to 41. Going backwards. And I mean, yes, a change of team can do that, but even with Panther City, I mean, 84 to 50, like what happened with that drop off? And on a team like this where Zach Mans, came into that team and really exploded. He went from, I just had it up, I lost. He went from like 36 points to 84. So it's not like the talent on the offense wasn't there to support a guy like Dodds to get him back to where he was. So something's going on with Dodds. He needs to be fixed. And like you just mentioned, if they can, because he is very young, he's only 23. So, I mean, you just got to hope. I mean, the talent's there, right? I mean, 84 points, what happened in the NLL, happened his rookie season. It's in there somewhere. So if they can find a way to get that back and add to that big three up top and then make that the, supporting fourth guy who is closer to 60 points, 70 points. And then, like you mentioned, if Mans takes that next step and they get probably just one kind of, I mean, we'll see what happens with Messenger. I think he's in a really good spot to come back to that team as far as age and everything. Like, he's definitely a player you want to bring back for sure. But if they can add another veteran defensive player, not necessarily someone at the end of his career, but somebody maybe 32, 33 who's been around to just kind of help that younger core like Dawson did for the Bandits. I know Dawson's a bit older, but someone like that for that defensive core just to add a little bit of veteran leadership back there. I think this team could be a little bit scary next season.
Yeah, and when you're trying to figure out where the Buffalo Bandits fit in this one, this was one of the tougher teams that I was struggling with. It's kind of like Vancouver with, hey, what piece would they be willing to give up? And I'm looking at it, I'm like, their defensive core with Boudreau and Kidd and Barnable and Jay and so on and so forth. They're a very young core. You would want to build around them, not send them out the door first team that's looking to make it back to the playoffs. So I went to the UFAs, and if I fully expect Mike Messenger to go back to Saskatchewan. So when you're seeing this name right here on all the social media accounts, don't give me crap for his name being there. This is the only name that I could fully expect Buffalo to try to target. He's a prime example of exactly what I want on this team to be doing if you're not getting a Dylan Robinson to step up, if you're not getting goals from a Nick Weiss in the transition game. You need another piece like an Ian McKay in the transition game because, and again, we're nitpicking the Buffalo Bandits. They just won back-to-back championships. There's not room on this team unless they make some moves. So I fully get that. Don't hear what I'm not saying. But 12 goals, 15 assists, 27 points from a transition player with 148 loose balls, 35 caused turnovers, 16 block shots, and he can take faceoffs, Phil. It's picture perfect of exactly what I want Buffalo to add. And yes, I know that means a piece is going out the door, but if you can add another Ian McKay-like player, might as well go try to get him because, again, I don't expect Saskatchewan to let him get anywhere. I fully expect him to sign before even free agency opens. I would fully expect him to sign sometime in July. But his name's out there, Phil, and I would be a bad podcaster of the Buffalo Bandits not to mention his name out there.
Yeah, he's very similar. I was trying to compare them real quick to your Tim Edwards from Colorado. The same kind of idea, transition player who can also do faceoffs, has that ability, but Mike Messenger's, I think, a step up from Tim Edwards as far as, I mean, they're
Step down
Face-off,
from face-offs, but step up in the transition game.
but not even really a step back from face-offs. Edwards was 52.3% and Messenger, 41.9. So yeah, he is a step back, but at the same time, like you just mentioned, step up in points, step up in defensive ability, and for us here, he's the kind of face-off guy we would want. Someone who not only can do everything, but you don't need him to win every single face-off. Like, that's not what we want from a face-off guy. We would just want, exactly, make it tough on their other guy, give you a chance to win it, and 41% is good enough here. It's not 10%, it's not 20%. It's still, it's close to half. That's pretty solid for a player who can also get you 27 points, 148 loose balls, and 35 caused turnovers. So Messenger would absolutely be a monster addition for the Bandits. I think it would be very upsetting for other teams if any of the names we really mentioned today ended up going to the Bandits. But to me, I mentioned on the last episode, I do think that, again, I don't want to see these players necessarily leave, but I mean, if you can upgrade from a LaRue, if you can upgrade from a Justin Robinson, I think these are the kind of players that if you can get a Mike Messenger, it stinks, but those other guys would be on the way out, and you would find a way to make a spot and a roster spot open for a guy like that who can do everything you're looking for. And honestly, if you look at a Mike Messenger, he would realistically, I mean, no offense to all the people that love him, but probably take over Connor Farrell's role completely, and you would just have him as your new face-off guy who can do that plus a lot more.
Yeah, 100%. But again, we fully understand there's not a ton of space.
It's very unlikely.
A lot of these pieces are very unlikely. The chances of them adding a bigger name player in free agency is very unlikely. They typically never do it. They just add smaller pieces that are more back end guys, the depth guys that can take over like you said, a Justin Robinson spot, a Sam LaRue spot, kind of like what they did a couple of years ago with Carter McKenzie. They brought him in and gave him a shot. It's some of those younger places, but then I also got to remember they still have 3 first-round picks and an early second-round pick. What are they going to do with those as well? So there's a lot of pieces and a lot of movement that still needs to happen with the Buffalo Bandits, but that pretty much wraps up today on our report cards for Vancouver, Calgary, and Saskatchewan. On our next show next Wednesday, we got the last of the 8 and 10 teams, Phil. Finally, we got New York, we got Rochester, and then we got the 9-9 Panther City Lacrosse Club on the next show. So if any of those pieces over there entice you, especially probably New York and Rochester being former East Coast teams, you'll want to stay tuned to next Wednesday's show. But we will jump in to our final segment here, about 52 minutes into this one. Mandatory mini camps are all wrapped up. Next step is training camp in July. Phil, I'm going to frame this to you. I got my 2 guys. Let's hear your 2 guys. 2 players you are most excited to see in camp. You can toss one or both of them out to me right now. We can go back and forth. However you see fit, all yours.
We can do 1 and 1, and then 1 and 1. So my first one is not necessarily it's not a player who's bad by any means. He's a fantastic player, but to me, the first one I have, and still debatable if he's going to even make it in time, but Matt Milano, they had some reports of him doing stuff off to the side, and he is floating around camp. It is still to be determined if he's going to be able to make it for training camp in July. I don't know if they're going to push him or anything, but if they do see him out there, I think to me it's just going to be, does he look like Matt Milano, right? He's a huge part of this defense. We already saw what injuries can do to a player like Trey White. He came back. He was still good, but he wasn't as explosive and he wasn't as incredible. He wasn't a top 5 CB when he came back, and then he got injured again. So Matt Milano to me is a very interesting one. If he can make it and be healthy in time for training camp, just what does he look like out there? Is he just as explosive as he was before he got injured? Does the injury look like it's really playing a part and he's truly taken a step back? He's such a big part of this team, but he's also a player that flies around the field and a player that is really good in coverage. So if a player like that, due to this kind of injury, takes a step back in his explosiveness and his speed, what does that look like for the Bills? What does that look like for him? I'm not saying he's going anywhere. He's still going to be a big part of this team, but you want Matt Milano back at 100%. You want him to look like the player he did before the injury, and it's just, you never know. Some players come back from these injuries and look perfectly fine. They're, running out their full speed, and some look like they've lost a step. So I'm just very interested to see if he does make it for training camp, what kind of Matt Milano we're looking at for this season.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see what he does alongside Terrell Bernard, because we did not see peak Bernard with peak
Right.
Matt Milano. And like you said, it's more injury related to see if he's able to come back from that injury. I also went with a defensive player, and this is a guy that's been making more noise in these camps than he has in a while. I mean, he's been more known as a gamer than a practice player. And I went with Kyrie Elam, and he's just been making, like I said, making noise and making splash plays in practices, and especially with Christian Benford. He was out for personal reasons. He was doing very well. I'm interested to see what he can do, both being healthy with a new DB coach. It sounds like Bobby Babbage is going to be the guy calling plays, but he's also a new DC. You got all new voices in Kyrie Elam's head, and I already mentioned this with Saskatchewan. If there's too many voices or the wrong voice in your head, it can affect your game. So maybe with a new DB coach that maybe can help him in practice, because as far as I can read between the lines, that was the main thing that was keeping him off the field, was his practicing and not making plays in practice or holding too much in practice or whatever it was. But the main reason that I'm interested to see with him is, can he carry this momentum when the pads go back on? Because you can do a lot of things, and a lot of players flash when there's no pads on the field, and there's no pads on those players when they're on the field. Players that, KJ Hamler could be looking a lot quicker when he doesn't have the pads on the field and can be making plays. Chase Claypool was making a ton of plays without pads on. It's a different game when those pads go on for both players and you can start hitting one another. So it's going to be very interesting to see if a year 3 with different voices in Kyrie Elam's head, that he can take that step forward. I'm still expecting him to be a backup on this team. I still think it's Benford and Douglas spots to lose, and I don't see either of them losing it, which is a little ironic because Benford was a 6th-round pick in the same year Kyrie Elam got picked. But if he can be that third piece and that guy that can give either of those guys a break or can step in if somebody gets healthy or hurt, I think he can have a very good year.
Yeah, I think just kind of a clean slate for him. Like, his expectations are 0 right now. Nobody has any expectations for him anymore, I don't think. I think everyone's fallen so far off of him because of his inability, especially as a first-round pick, to really make any impact on the field over 2 years. So I think getting a fresh start and literally having no, I would assume, expectations coming into the season other than, can you be a backup CB3 rotational player? Like, if that's what you're aiming for, hopefully he can kind of get out of his own head, where he kind of seemed like his first year especially, and maybe even the second year, he put a lot of pressure on himself to be that next player for the Bills, and he just was not living up to that role. So now, coming in as more of a depth role, maybe he can start kind of just playing up to the expectation the Bills had of him when they drafted him originally. My second one is a player that I've been a big fan of for a long time, but he's looking scarier than I would like to at least start the season. Tyler Bass. I think they should have brought some competition in for him. He was decent last year, made 24 of 29, field goal attempts 49 of 50, extra points, not terrible. But in playoffs, he is 12 of 17. That's not going to do it. 26 of 29 extra points. That's not great for playoffs when you should be missing 0. Last year, as far as conversion rate with field goal attempts of at least 28, there were 21 kickers ahead of him for a team that, supposedly has Super Bowl aspirations. I don't know. This year, they said he missed his first 3 kicks the other day from 45, 35, and 35, which is atrocious. And then made a 50, missed a 45, made a 50, and went 1 for 2 later on a 50 and finished with an 83% last season. I don't know. He needs to step up a ton this offseason, so I'm very interested. I know it seems dumb to keep an eye on a kicker, but right now, coming out of the mandatory mini camps, he did terrible. So head into July, he needs to seemingly get a lot fixed, and I don't know, I'm a little upset. I don't know who's out there, probably no one, but I'm a little upset that the Bills just have no competition for him right now. I know he's their guy, but seeing how he's performed in playoffs, seeing how he's performing to start mandatory mini camps, it's all just a bit too scary, especially last year he had 29 field goal attempts. If we expect this offense to take a little bit of a step backwards with no Diggs, he might be relied on a lot more this season with that team not being able to get closer to the red zone or not being able to finish off drives. His attempts might go through the roof this season if that offense takes even a little bit of a step back. So you want somebody that can actually, convert those very consistently. So if he's struggling already, that is scary for a team that might need to rely on their field goal kicker a little bit more this season.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's a team that's going to be playing a lot closer games. There's going to be less blowouts, and you're going to have to rely on your kicker to make those clutch kicks in those close games. And I think the biggest reason they didn't bring in competition for him is because it's going to be near impossible to cut him. I think it's like a $3 million dead cap, or he's going to cost more $3 million more if he's not on the team. So he's definitely going to be the kicker this year unless something drastic happens. But I completely agree. He's a player that needs to step up because, mind you, I think Kansas City was going to go down the field and kick and win the game regardless if he made that kick or not. I'm not putting the blame on him whatsoever. But yeah, playoffs last year were not his expertise. I think he missed 3 or 4.
70% conversion in playoffs. That's so bad.
Yeah, he's definitely got to step up. For me, it's a guy that also needs to step up. He's on the offensive side of the ball, though. It's James Cook. And it's not his running ability. It's he needs to improve on his pass catching. And he definitely needs to. He hurt the Bills a lot last year with pass drops, and the one that stands out is he was right on the goal line and he just dropped the ball. And from what I was reading in Mandatory Minute, he was not improving, and he made a lot of critical drops in not critical, but he was making drops in practice as well. He's not a true. There's not a true guy on the roster for that job. There's not a pass-catching running back on that roster. I think Ty Johnson's decent. What's Ray Davis going to look like, the guy they just drafted? I think James Cook has it in him, and he's shown it in college. He's not a true pass-catching back, but when the ball's in his hands, he makes electric plays. He's got to get that Dawson Knox out of him and be able to catch those balls. And especially in this offense going into this year where there's not a true number one, you're going to have to rely on him for those swing passes and dump offs and close to the goal line plays, and get a little bit of trickery here to try to get in the end zone as well. So James Cook definitely has to fix that drops and improve in that area of his game drastically going into his third year.
Yeah, it sounds like in mandatory minicamps he also continued to drop the ball.
That's what I mean, yeah.
Not good. And especially for a player that's going to be leaned on more, I would assume, this year, given everything going on with the offense, and just a player that, like you said, the running's there. Like, you had over 1,000 yards rushing. For a guy like that who has that already in him, you'd think that your main focus as him, obviously you want to continue to improve on your running in general as an NFL player, but you'd think the whole offseason would be about his ability to catch the ball, and to have him come in even to mandatory minicamp already still dropping them. You'd think at this point that would be your 100% focus as that running back, because the Bills like using it. I mean, they have proved it last year. They like using the ability to pass to him. Like you said, he had a few walk-in touchdowns that were just literally through his hands. So something he definitely needs to work on and hopefully can fix a little bit headed into mandatory minicamp. Or training camp, sorry.
But Phil, that pretty much wraps up episode 291. We're 9 weeks away from the illustrious 3-0. Phil, is there anything else on this episode before we shut it down for a full week and try to hide in our houses in the AC and avoid the plagued sun? Because I got pretty burnt this last weekend.
No, that's what I was going to mention. Stay cool. Get your pools open if you got them. Find a friend who has a pool. Find a way to stay cool out there. It's going to be hot, and it's a little concerning. I was enjoying. We were definitely spoiled with the incredible fall weather that we had for a little bit there, but now seeing that it's only mid-June and we're hitting 90s is not good for July and August that are yet to come.
Yeah, as pet parents, make sure you keep an eye on your pets and limited outdoor exposure, because they get hot just like us, and they got fur and get hotter. Imagine wearing a jacket outside. So that pretty much wraps up this episode. Next episode, we'll be talking Buffalo Sabres, because the draft is actually next weekend. Buffalo still has their pick as of this Sunday. Move it.
Boo.
Get rid of it. So we'll talk at the draft and what we're kind of expecting them to do with the pick, or, expecting what players to be there. We'll talk the next 3 teams, New York, Rochester, and Panther City, on our report cards. And any other news, Matt Vinc, sign. Otherwise, we're having our 4th installment of the Mad Matty Minute with the fun little graphic above my head. But thank you all for listening to another episode of the Buffalo Sports Collective. Thank you to Tap That Tap Room and Mr. Sizzles for sponsoring this show and this episode. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Buffalo Sports Collective, and on X and Blue Sky at Buffalo Sports Co. Visit our website at buffalosportscollective.com. You can check out our store on our link tree on our socials or the shop tab at the top of the website. Follow our channel wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure you leave us a review on Apple and Spotify. Until next time, bye-bye.